What if two teenage boys uncovered something they were never supposed to see? What if their deaths were labeled an accident before anyone truly investigated? And what if the truth was buried, not because it was unclear, but because it was dangerous? On August 23, 1987, two teenage boys were found dead on railroad tracks in Arkansas. Their bodies were crushed. Their case was closed quickly, and officials said there was nothing suspicious about it. But for decades, investigators, journalists, and families have asked the same question: how do two healthy teenagers fall asleep on active train tracks and never wake up? This is the story of the boys on the tracks, a case that many believe wasn't an accident but a cover-up. On the night of August 22, 1987, Kevin Ives and Don Henry made what seemed like an ordinary decision. They were going out. Kevin told his mother he needed to borrow her car. He didn't say where they were going. He didn't say how long they'd be gone. But there was nothing unusual about that. Kevin was 17. Don was 16. They lived in a small Arkansas town where teenagers often drove around late at night, talking, listening to music, and killing time. Before leaving, Kevin reportedly mentioned to friends that he might be checking something out later that night. Something he'd seen before. Something that had stuck in his mind. He didn't explain further, and no one pushed him for answers. The boys left sometime after dark. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Still no one panicked. It wasn't until early morning, when Kevin still hadn't returned the car, that his mother began to worry. By sunrise, worry turned into fear. Search efforts began quietly at first. Family members drove around the usual spots teenagers went at night: back roads, fields, friends' houses. Then, just after dawn, several miles away, a freight train was moving along the tracks near a remote wooded area. The engineer later said visibility was limited. The tracks curved slightly. By the time he noticed something ahead, it was already too late. Two shapes lay directly across the rails. The train struck them at full speed. When it finally came to a stop, the scene was horrifying. Kevin Ives and Don Henry were dead. Their bodies were badly damaged. Local authorities arrived quickly, but what happened next would raise serious questions. Questions that still lingered decades later. Instead of treating the area as a potential crime scene, officials moved fast, too fast. Within hours, an explanation was offered. According to law enforcement, the boys had been smoking marijuana. They became intoxicated. They lay down on the tracks. They fell asleep, and they never woke up. It was labeled a tragic accident. No extensive search for evidence. No secure perimeter. No careful reconstruction of the night. Just a conclusion. And for the families, the shock was overwhelming. Kevin's mother could not understand it. Her son was not reckless. It was not suicidal. He was not the kind of person to lie down on railroad tracks. Don's family felt the same. Neither boy had a history of drug abuse. Neither had ever done anything remotely like this before. And yet, authorities seemed uninterested in any alternative explanation. There was no attempt to reconstruct their movements that night. No serious effort to determine where they'd been before ending up on the tracks. No timeline. Just a theory, repeated until it became fact. As word spread through the community, whispers began almost immediately. People who lived near the tracks said the area was quiet that night. No reports of loud music. No signs of teenagers hanging out. Others questioned how two boys could fall asleep on hard steel rails, knowing trains passed through regularly. And most unsettling of all, people asked how both boys could remain asleep as a freight train approached, blasting its horn and shaking the ground. The official story required too many unlikely assumptions, but at the time, no one in power seemed interested in asking those questions. The case was already being closed, and whatever happened to Kevin Ives and Don Henry that night was being quietly pushed into the background, unexamined, unchallenged, and almost forgotten. The explanation sounded simple, too simple. Medical examiners later noted something deeply disturbing. Kevin Ives had a crushed skull, injuries inconsistent with being struck by a train. Don Henry showed signs of stab wounds and trauma before the train impact. None of the boy had marijuana level high enough to cause unconsciousness, and perhaps most damning of all, there was no blood on the tracks. If two boys had been alive when hit by a train, there should have been blood everywhere. There wasn't. That suggested only one thing: they were already dead before the train arrived. The county coroner, Dr. Fahmy Malik, ruled the deaths accidental, but Malik was already controversial. He had a long history of questionable rulings, including cases later overturned. Under pressure, a second autopsy was finally ordered. The new findings contradicted the original ruling. The boys had suffered injuries before the train strike. The manner of death was changed, not to murder, but to undetermined. And that single word would stall justice for decades. As journalists began digging, a darker theory emerged. The area where Kevin and Don were found was rumored to be a drug drop zone. Arkansas, at the time, was a major corridor for drug trafficking. Multiple witnesses later claimed that Kevin had spoken about seeing something illegal, possibly drug smuggling, involving powerful local figures. Some even claimed the operation was connected to state officials. Kevin reportedly told friends he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to, something worth killing over. As investigators pushed deeper, something chilling happened. Witnesses began dying. One man who claimed to have information was found dead, ruled a suicide. Another was killed in a mysterious accident. Others suddenly refused to talk. Journalist Mara Leverett documented the case extensively. She uncovered a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Anyone who came close to exposing the truth seemed to vanish or be silenced. A grand jury was eventually convened. Evidence was presented. Contradictions were laid bare, and yet no indictments were issued. The jury claimed there wasn't enough evidence. Families were devastated. The boys were dead. The truth was known, but accountability never came. The deeper investigators went, the more uncomfortable the case became. Allegations surfaced involving drug trafficking, law enforcement, corruption, political protection at the highest levels. Some claimed the boys stumbled upon a drop linked to a network that no one dared expose. If true, Kevin and Don didn't just die, they were eliminated. Decades later, the case remains officially unresolved. No arrests, no convictions, no justice. But it's remembered not just because two boys died, it's remembered because of what their deaths suggests. That sometimes, the truth isn't hidden because it's unclear. It's hidden because revealing it would destroy too many powerful lives. The story of the boys on the tracks isn't just about Kevin Ives and Don Henry. It's about a system that failed them. A system that chose convenience over truth, silence over justice, protection over accountability. Two teenagers walked into the night and never came back. Their families never stopped asking questions. And maybe that's the most disturbing part of all. Not that the case went unsolved, but that it may have been solved and buried. This was The Boys on the Tracks. A case that reminds us why criminal records exist. Because sometimes the most dangerous lie is the one everyone agrees to believe.